Good morning, everybody. Welcome once again to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. Lenny, great start to our day. And for those of you watching, whether we're on Facebook or the network, I'm going to be looking in the chat room for your comments this morning. So feel free to, give me some feedback and let's get going with the show today. I want to first talk about some injuries and what it can mean fantasy wise. Soroka, my theme song last year, Mike Soroka. Well, Soroka is out for the year. I don't know if you saw it last night. Ball hit. He's going to cover first. He turns off of the mound, heading towards first base. Never gets really off the mound. Falls down. He's torn his Achilles. And those are like a year injury. Okay. And it's not like something you're going to recover from in, 4, 5, 6 months. He's probably out until July or August of next year. Big loss for the Braves. And so now let's talk about someone like Tuki Toussaint having to step up. Is he ready for that role? The Braves certainly have some players down on the farm that they can call up. Ian Anderson, unique, right? I mean, we've heard a lot about him. The Braves have been careful not to rush Anderson. But now I'm wondering if there's a situation where they feel like they need to call Anderson on up, bring him up to Atlanta, add him to the mix. There's a lot of young pitchers there. And my concern for the Braves, maybe not this year, because this year is not your normal year, but have you got so many young pitchers on one team? Now there's talent. We know that. Soroka's a huge loss. So if you're looking at Atlanta's replacements, I think Anderson, maybe adding a Toussaint, taking a flyer there. What if you're not? What if you're looking outside of the Braves? If you're in a fantasy league where now you've got Soroka, you're looking to add another pitcher, where do you go? I don't know what type league you're in. I think what you do is you give it a scroll. Look what Soroka did. He gave you ERA. He gave you whip. He didn't walk a lot of batters. Didn't strike out a lot either. That was not his game, being a strikeout pitcher. He was a control guy. And I take a look at the pitcher last night for the Cubs, Mills, who is a similar pitcher, a poor man's version of Soroka, probably not owned in a lot of leagues at this point. Looked pretty good for the Cubs last night. Chatwood has looked exceptionally well for the Cubs. The Cubs, even John Lester is off to a great start. And in a 60-game season, I don't know how you look at starting pitchers. I like to look at – good morning, Kevin Hastings. I like to look at who, as a starting pitcher, has a chance to go some innings, give me some stats, and possibly get a win. And when you're on a winning team, you got a better chance to pick up that W. They're elusive. I know we don't chase them. But look at the Cubs rotation. Not a lot of frontliners. There may be someone out there on your waiver wire that you can add to take the place of Mike Soroka going forward. Just a thought. Also, how about out in Oakland? Chris Bassett's looked really good. The A's, they're going to have Puck coming back, hopefully, in the next week or so. And he's got to work back in, but he said he was going to take a couple of weeks off. We'll see what Puck does. But Bassett could be a really good ad in a fantasy league as well. There are a lot of those type players out there. Rich Hill goes down yesterday. Rich Hill, the chronic IL player, pitched really good his first outing, 5 innings, shutout ball, stiff back. He's on the 10-day IL. Yet another pitcher to replace if you had him on your fantasy team. Do you stash Rich Hill? Do you just cut bait? I think you just cut bait at this time of the year. We know the history of Rich Hill. It's always something. When he pitches, he's really good. The problem is can't stay healthy. Let's talk about another team real quick and some injuries. And, when we started the season, we looked at the Mets as a team who probably could contend in the National League East. 10 games in, the Mets are 3-7. And what looked like back in the spring a really good pitching staff has turned into not so much. You've got, of course, the greatest pitcher on the planet, DeGrom, but after that, it falls off precipitously. The bullpen has been, well, not good. And now, what was a strength, which was the infield, you had all these players. You had Cano, you had McNeil, you had Rosario. And the three players I've just named are now all injured, all at the same time. They all came out of the game early last night. Cano, a left groin. Now, Cano's 36 years old. He's a great hitter. And over the last few days, Cano has hit over 400. He has been smoking at the plate. But he's 36. He's in a short season. And if you listen to Lenny this morning, the one thing we know about baseball is it's a repetition game. It's not only a repetition, in timing at bats, but it's also a repetition in daily stretching. Stretching is probably in baseball the biggest thing you can do, whether it's a leg, whether it's a hip, whether it's a shoulder. Stretch, stretch, stretch. You can't stretch too much. And it's a routine. And let's face it, every player in MLB has been out of their routine ever since March. It has not been a standard routine. I'm not saying these guys haven't gone out and worked hard to try to stay in shape. I am saying these guys have had a difficult time being in a place where they can have consistent stretching, workouts, keeping their bodies toned. And now you got a 36-year-old Robinson Cano who's got a sore groin, left groin. I mean, those are naggers. They nag. They don't go away. Cano's going to have to take at least a few days off. But that's not the worst of it. Ahmad Rosario, their young shortstop, he has a left quad problem, came out of the game. And probably most important is Jeff McNeil, who plays all over the place, is a great hitter, and now he's got lower back problems. And I attribute all of these, I think Lenny touched on it as well, all of these to the inconsistency in where they're working out, how they're working out. It can't be the same when you're working out at home as when you're at a stadium doing it. It just cannot be. So the severity of these three injuries, not yet known, but we do know the Mets are sitting at 3-7. We do know over the weekend, Yoenis Cespedes, and I heard some reports, I read some reports yesterday. It's not quite clear how it worked. Did Cespedes' agent first go to the Mets and say he's not coming back because of the COVID, or did he just not show up? And Jeff Sutton, you're right. I'm reading in the comments going on. Diaz can't get it together. They refuse to let Lugo be the closer. Once everybody's healthy, and that's the deal. Do we know the extent of the injuries today? No. Cano now could probably get some DH at bats. But with the left groin, it's torque. And with the torque, how much of a problem is that going to be for Cano for the rest of the season? And now you're looking at having to play a J.D. Davis regularly. He's just not a good defender. Good bat, fantasy-wise, he's great, but JD's not a great defender. And they're going to have to come up with more than one replacement. They've already replaced Cespedes. I don't know. It's always something with the Mets, and it just looks to me like these injuries that they're facing, well, it's just going to be a difficult year, and now we're 10 games in. So let's talk about some players. First of all, I want to talk about some call-ups. Two call-ups real quick that were popular yesterday. One very popular, one not so much, but they're very similar players from everything I've read about them. Joe Adell, much heralded everywhere but on Lenny's show. And I give Lenny a lot of credit because Lenny has gone to Arizona Fall Leagues probably since before I was born, has watched players over the years, and has a keen eye for how players may play once they get to the show. And I've heard him say over the last year and a half, Joe Adell is overrated. Now, I'll have to trust Lenny. I haven't seen him play. Good morning, Lenny. But Adell's going to get the chance, and you got to believe if the Angels are calling Joe Adell up today, he's going to get a chance to play. Now, there's two sides to that. Number one, from the Joe Adell perspective, if Joe Adell's getting called up, I think they're going to have a long leash with him. I think if you're a fantasy owner and you've got him on your team, a wise move might be, let's see what happens first. Remember last year, Kyle Tucker, a lot of promise, or 2 years ago. That was last year. And he finally comes up and he absolutely bombs. Remember Carter Kieboom coming up to Washington. Homer's in his first at bat. And I'm not exact on this, but then goes like 0 for his next 25. The thing with rookies, we just don't know when they get to that next level how they're going to progress. And so if you've got Adell, I'm not saying you should cut him. I'm just saying keep your eye on him and see how he performs. You may not want to throw him in your lineup right away. But another player to me who is as intriguing, if not more so, is 24-year-old Monte Harrison of the Miami Marlins. Craig Mish said on sportsgrid.com that he is expected to be called up today. And the 24-year-old has made quite the impression on all the Marlins, particularly manager Don Mattingly. Now, we know the Marlins have had 19 outbreaks of COVID, and so they're looking for players not named to the roster early in the year, but on the roster now, or it looks like. Harrison at AAA last year hit 274, had a 357 on-base percentage, and a 451 slug. He hit 9 home runs in 56 games and had 20 stolen bases. So he can run. He can hit with some power. Now, like a lot of rookies who do that, he's probably going to strike out some. But you got to take that with it. It goes with the package. You don't think Adell's going to strike out too? Here's the thing. You can get Harrison a lot cheaper if you're playing daily, if you're playing season long. You can get Harrison a lot cheaper than you can get Joe Adell. And I think you may be talking about the same kind of player. Plus, look at who it's all about confidence, right? You got that speed, power threat both ways, both of these guys. But the Marlins get to play Baltimore this week. And that's who Harrison starts his career against, the Orioles. And the Orioles have been surprising so far, no doubt. 5-5. I mean, I didn't think they'd win their 5 out of the first 10. Of course, then I didn't realize Boston was going to be as bad pitching as they are. Don't you know the Blue Jays are looking forward to this coming weekend? We'll talk about that probably Thursday. But the Blue Jays play in Boston this weekend. And on one fantasy team I have Gurriel, I have Bichette, I have Biggio, the top 3 hitters. I can't wait for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Last weekend, I felt like I had been ambushed, for fantasy. My Blue Jays couldn't play. My Nationals couldn't play. I had no base hitters on my team. But now they get to play the Orioles or the Red Sox this weekend. I digress. Back to Monte Harrison. He gets to play the Orioles. And so it's a great starting point for Monte Harrison playing against the Orioles. I think he's going to be a player. And I think if you can go add him in your leagues, that's exactly what you need to do. Go add Monte Harrison to your fantasy team. Take a flyer on him. Probably get him cheap. See what you got. Let's talk about a pitcher today who's pitching today. Now, I've seen this guy pitch. Christian Javier, Houston Astro. How many of you guys have seen Javier? First of all, he is an imposing individual on the pitcher's mound just from a physical presence. And he throws really hard, which helps, right? Now, his first major league start last week was against the Dodgers. Now, against the Dodgers, remember, I want you to tell me a National League offense better than the Los Angeles Dodgers. A National League offense better than the Dodgers. It's going to be hard to find one. Christian Javier last week against the Dodgers limited LA to 2 hits and 1 run over 5 2/3 innings and struck out 8. Now he faces today a struggling D-back squad who have scored only 2 runs in the last 2 games and have hit a paltry 188 off of right-handers this year. Let me repeat that. Diamondback hitters have hit 188 off of righties this year. Now, I know Javier has only had 1 start against the Dodgers, mind you, but he's 23, throws really hard, facing a favorable team today. And I'm bringing him up because in DFS play, if I'm getting me a pitcher, I don't know what he cost in DFS, but he's got to be less expensive than others. I think he's an intriguing DFS play. I think he's worth adding in season long as well. And at a minimum, he's a streamer for this week. He should get 2 starts this week. He should start today and should start on Sunday. So Christian Javier for Houston, you can do worse. How about this guy? I'm hitting on some players here, okay? And I'm going to talk about some more injuries in a few minutes, but I'm going to talk about some good players so far. And, we know, first of all, congrats to Aaron Judge and Nicholas Castellanos for being the American League and National League Players of the Week. Great start to their seasons. Judge and Castellanos, and my brother and I, we're both Yankee fans. You can tell behind me, but my brother's the biggest Yankees fan ever. I mean, Kevin can tell you scores from 1979, probably the date of the score, probably the box score itself. And he'll say to me, I think I'm right. And when he does, I'll say, I don't have to look it up. I mean, he's sort of like a walking Yankee almanac. And so we were talking yesterday, watching the game, and isn't it amazing how Gio Urshela was an average at best third baseman when in Cleveland? Yeah, he played for the Indians. He gets to the Yankees, and if you watch this kid play this year, okay, so he's hit home runs. He hit a home run 403 feet against the Phillies yesterday. He broke out last year with 24 homers. This year he has a 1.101 OPS. His power bump has continued. And prior to this year, last year, he never posted an exit velocity over 88 miles per hour. Last year, he averaged 90.6. Urshela is a great defensive third baseman. I think he could win a Gold Glove. He made a play over the bag last night, and if you've played third base, I have. If you've played some third base in your life, then you know it's a challenging position. He picked the ball up over the base, threw a guy out, but he's a hitter too. And I don't know, I'm sure by now Urshela has been grabbed up in your fantasy league, but if not, he is a star. Not just he's going to be, he is. We've already talked about the Mets. I do want to go back to that because I was reading something this morning that Andres Jimenez will probably be the next man up to replace Rosario at shortstop. Andres Jimenez, Gimenez. Okay? He will probably be the shortstop for the Mets if you're looking internally to replace Rosario. And, I don't know. I got to get off the Mets. Let's talk about Carlos Rodon. Former North Carolina State great. Carlos Rodon pitching last night, pitched 2 innings, left the game with shoulder soreness. He's going to be reevaluated today. Will they move him to the bullpen? And to me, Rodon just screams out as a closer in waiting for the White Sox. Think about that rotation. Think about if you could add him as a second closer to column A. What a bullpen you would have. And it just looks like with the injuries Rodon has had, a move to the bullpen makes perfect sense, at least to me. So we'll see. I was looking at a box score, and I think Lenny has his box score porn. I love that segment. But the Oakland A's have been sleeping giants. Last night, the A's get 12 hits against Seattle. They have an 8-run fifth. And I'm looking to see after last night's game if Oakland builds from there. You know, they have been historically slow starters. But looking at this box score, every starter last night got a hit. Semien got 1. Laureano got 2. Kana got 1. Chapman 1. Olsen 1 with 3 walks. I think Olsen getting 3 walks says a lot. He's seeing the ball now. Pender 1. Piscotty 2 and Murphy 1. But then there's Chris Davis with a K, who may have been cut in some of your fantasy leagues. I watched some of the game. He looks like his timing is back. He looks healthy. He was off to a tremendously slow start, but face it. I think Lenny said Yelich is now hitting 093. Well, some players just start slow. Chris Davis has started slow this year. Not historically a slow starter, but this year is 2020. Everything's different. Chris Davis went 2 for 3 last night, hit his first home run of the year, drove in a couple of runs and a walk with no strikeouts. Oakland, 12 hits, 11 runs, 11 walks. That's the kind of team we expect from Oakland. Semien walked. Laureano walked. Kana walked twice. Olsen walked 3 times. And the aforementioned Chris Davis walked. And Murphy, the catcher, walked twice. When they're walking more than striking out, and they did last night, and they're hitting 12 hits a game, which isn't going to happen every game. But I'm looking now for Oakland to catapult from this night forward. And today, who pitches for Oakland? Jesus Lazaro. The rookie phenom pitching for Oakland. Now that they've started hitting, we know hitting is all about confidence. We know hitting is contagious. We know hitting spreads on up and down that lineup. I'm going to watch the A's today and see what they do. So let's get to our segment on DFS. If Phil Chaplin is around, if Phil Chaplin is watching, this is the segment that he dies and longs for. And we're going to talk about how hitters perform historically against pitching. You know, yesterday's a good example. You can look at it one of 2 ways. You can say, well, because Realmuto was 10 for 14 against Cole, he can't continue that pace. True. But he did get a hit last night. So as I go through the pitching matchups today, let's start with Pittsburgh and Minnesota. My question here is, will Josh Donaldson play? He's hitting 273 lifetime off of Joe Musgrove, but he's injured. So I don't know what we can make of that or not make of that. I'm looking at other games, and if I don't see 10 at-bats or more, I just skip it. And that's what I'm looking at a lot of today. Now, Eovaldi's pitching against Morton, and I do think Kevin Kiermaier is hitting 333 off of Eovaldi. And if you need an outfielder today, probably Kiermaier. Gives you some power, gives you some speed, probably not that expensive. Off Charlie Morton, Xander Bogaerts 10 for 26 with a homer. That's a 385 average. Benintendi 5 for 18. Moreland 5 for 20, and Devers 5 for 18. Now, how many of you have been disappointed with Rafi Devers? I watched him Sunday night. I tell you one thing about the kid. He may have struggled at the plate. A lot of players have done that early this year. But I watched him make some gold glove plays in the field. And I know we don't count defense in so many fantasy leagues. But it was encouraging to me to watch Rafi Devers play such great defense and not allow his struggles at the plate to follow him into the field, which means to me it's not gone mental with it yet. We know the talent is there. And how many of you are just on the edge of your seat waiting for Rafi Devers in fantasy to break out? Now, Charlie Morton, maybe not the best candidate doing this, but let's face it, Tampa has not been who we think they should be this year so far. Let's move it along. Steven Matz taking on the Nationals. Trey Turner, 8 for 25 off of Matz. That's a 320 average. Starling Castro, 7 for 23 off of Matz. 304. Castro probably cheat today in DFS. I don't know what he cost. Someone to certainly look at. Toronto playing Atlanta. Max Fried and Schumacher, not enough information. Miami at Baltimore, I talked about earlier. John Means, the left-hander pitching for Baltimore. Miami, don't know who. Chicago playing Milwaukee. You've got Giolito going against Brandon Woodruff, two really good pitchers. Not enough stats there to give you any recommendation for daily today. Kyle Hendricks pitching today for the Cubs at Wrigley Field against Brady Singer. I do know who someone you probably don't want to pick up. Maikel Franco, who's 2 for 14 off of Hendricks. Not that you would be clamoring for Maikel Franco today in fantasy, but certainly one that I would be on the lookout for. Now, an interesting game to me, and they've been interesting all week, and they're 4-game series. We're in game 2 today. It's the Giants at Colorado. And I want to spend a little time here talking about giant bats. Herman Marquez is pitching today, and Hunter Pence, who's off to an extremely slow start. But Hunter Pence has gone 5 for 12 off of Marquez. That's over a 400 average. Brandon Belt has gone 7 for 16 off of him, and Brandon Crawford 6 for 16. So these left-handed 2 bats for the Giants have performed well. I think the Giants are going to hit better in Colorado than anywhere else they may play. And probably, I know because we're in Colorado, the price may be up. But I'd be looking – now Marquez has pitched well. But Marquez is a much better pitcher away from Colorado, as is the case with most of those pitchers, than he is at home. So the Rangers play the A's today. Lance Lynn is pitching. Semien is 6 for 12 against Lance Lynn. I just talked about the A's a few minutes ago. I don't have enough stats, but Luzardo's pitching for Texas. I think it's a great time to own Luzardo in fantasy. There's not, as they say, a book on him yet. I would strongly recommend looking at those two. Lamette's pitching against May tonight, the Padres and the Dodgers. Not enough stats there to give you either. And then finally tonight, Haney for the Angels against Justin Dunn, the Mariners at Safeco Field. For the Mariners against Haney, let's see here. D. Gordon, 4 for 12. And so, the thing with Gordon is I don't know how much he's playing these days. I look in the box scores, he's not starting. The Mariners have hit Shed Long, has been a great pickup for fantasy players so far. Of course, their outfielder, they've got some bats on that team. And Seager has hit the ball hard too. So you may want to look at some of those guys in the late game tonight. The thing about picking players late on DFS is you pick them late. You don't, if you're like me on the East Coast, you go to bed early. You wake up the next morning and say, wow, he did that. I mean, it's one of those kind of things. Wow, he did that kind of night, you know. But it'll be interesting to see how the Mariners continue to play. And that, you know, frankly, I've been surprised with their performance so far. I think they've done a really good job on starting the season and getting the job done. So we'll see how they do tonight out on the West Coast late. I want to talk about a few more players. Jacob deGrom struck out season high 10 over 6 innings last night for the Mets. Great outing for him. Of course, we know he is some kind of player. Now, Walker Buehler, and we've talked about Walker Buehler a little bit on the show. I'm talking about a little bit more. Walker Buehler has had a slow start to preparing for the season, which to me is a warning sign. Now, he pitched 5 innings last night. He gave up 3 runs, and every hit he gave up was a home run. Now, did he look good otherwise? He looked pretty good at times. But the fact that he's given up 3 home runs in the game tells me he's not locating his pitch, which goes back to repetitions. I think the more Buehler can play, the more he'll get back to being Buehler and not giving up the home runs. The thing is, we got such a short fantasy season, not sure when your playoffs start. But he has a 5.19 ERA through 8 2/3 innings this season. His next projected start is against the Giants on Sunday. Now, how many of you guys who own Buehler are going to be looking to see if he can lower that ERA Sunday against the Giants? I think it's a big start for him. It's his 3rd start of the year. I think you can give people rope the first couple of starts, but face it, you've only got 12 starts to the season. So after Sunday, our season is 25% over. 25% over after Sunday. So we'll see. Big games tonight. Let's look at the schedule for tonight real quick. And hopefully we'll have some good games. Lamette in May. I told you, kick off with the Padres series. That's a great series. Padres win last night. The first pitch today is at 2:10 p.m. Musgrove against Berrios. You know, I'm just not a Berrios guy. I just cannot go there. And the thing about the Twins, I don't deny their ability to hit. Now, Musgrove's a good pitcher, so I want to see how they hit today. I'm not playing Sano today in fantasy, I'll tell you that. I can just see 3 strikeouts coming for Miguel Sano today. But Berrios, to me, has just never lived up to the hype. It's not for lack of ability. It's just, I don't know. There's something there that's not ever quite clicked with Jose Berrios. He's not a shutdown pitcher. But there is one pitching today at Great American Ballpark. Shane Bieber, with no runs allowed, pitching against Tyler Mahle for the Reds. That game, first pitch, 6:10 p.m. The Red Sox and the Rays. Nathan Eovaldi at 6:40 squares off against Charlie Morton. The Mets and the Nats at 7:05. The Nats have not announced their starter yet. Matz is pitching for the Mets. Blue Jays and Braves. Max Fried at 7:10. The Blue Jays, they're throwing a guy in his initials are TBD. The Marlins and Orioles, Lopez and Means at 7:35. White Sox and Brewers, Giolito and Woodruff, 8:10. Royals and Cubs, rookie Brady Singer squares off against Kyle Hendricks. Kyle Hendricks not nearly as effective in his second start as he was in his first. That game's at 8:15 at Wrigley Field. The Giants and Rockies from Coors Field. The Giants, again, another pitcher named TBD. There's a lot of those today pitching. Marquez pitching for the Rockies. Rangers and A's, Lance Lynn and Jesus Luzardo. Arizona hosting the Astros. Javier and Bumgarner. Angels are at T-Mobile Park in Seattle. Haney and Dunn. The Cardinals Tigers are postponed. The Phillies Marlins are postponed. So that's just a look at some of DFS plays today, some of what's going on in the real world, fantasy world. Keep your eye on that Marlin outfielder, okay? And I'll be back with you tonight. Okay, here's our schedule. 7 o'clock tonight, Phil Chaplin. 7 o'clock tonight. And then at 9, Chappie and I back together again. As Hall & Oates sang one time. Or as Peaches and Herb would sing, reunited, and it feels so good. We'll be on tonight at 9 o'clock talking the best fantasy news in the biz. So join us at 9, join Chappie at 7. Until then, have a great day from Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports and Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports.